This year, our theme, Language in the Machine, looks at the role of algorithms and how they're shaping communication and creating new elements of language. Since the birth of the internet, the cell phone, and the computer, we've seen these new elements take over our day-to-day communications, including GIFs, emojis, video, voice commands, haptic responses, chatbots, and of course, many more. And so, as these algorithms advance and as the proliferation of technology impacts more and more people on the planet, we are here this week to ask, what will this mean for the future of language and human communication? And to kick us off this morning and to join this conversation, I'm delighted to welcome my very good friend, Ian Schafer, to the stage. In addition to being the founder and chairman of Deep Focus, Ian also holds the title of being the only person, as far as I'm aware, who has presented at every single Social Media Week New York event since 2009, since we first launched. So welcome, Ian. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me again. It's great. It's a good streak.
Wow, you already get a round of applause. That's impressive.
You haven't heard me yet.
So, actually, I should have a clicker. I think it's up on the stage. Let me go and grab it quickly. Sorry.
These aren't my slides, for the record. Are they? Oh, good.
Right. So, we're going to jump right in, and we want to sort of give the conversation a little bit of structure, mainly just to avoid Ian and I going off on kind of a variety of different tangents. And so, we're basically going to be talking about, oh, could you load that up for us? Thank you. We're going to be talking about 5 trends. The first of which is the rise of video viewership, messaging as the dominant platform, the rise of machine-assisted communications, new layers of immersion, and shifting business models and metrics. All right, we'll just sort of plow on. So let's start with video viewership. Obviously, it's going to be a hot topic this week. We're touching on video in a variety of different ways. And I know many of you here this morning are very keen to touch on and learn about some of the emerging trends in video. But we know that Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook Live are leading the way. We also know that video formats are changing constantly, and so this medium is presenting a whole set of new challenges as it sort of changes, as it shifts in form and function. And so, give the audience in like your high-level sort of perspective of the video landscape today.
So, the video landscape as it pertains to digital or television or all of it together?
I think just a general, in the digital context of video.
Moving pictures. There. All right. So this is a weird time right now. So yesterday, or maybe the day before, I was on a plane. It turns out, YouTube passed 1 billion hours of video viewed per day, which is an amazing thing. I mean, that's a huge tipping point, because if you look at viewership for television, what we classically define as television, it's flatlined. I don't mean like dead, it's just plateaued. Whereas YouTube is on pace to absolutely obliterate the amount of time and hours spent watching TV. So, speaking from an advertiser, marketer, that kind of perspective, digital video has become the primary use case for anything that moves for advertisers. So, I can tell you, even as running an agency, I mean, when we're making video, we're making it for the internet, knowing that it will probably wind up on television. Television winds up, being a place where, I guess, many brands are comfortable launching a product, especially if they want to do it around a primetime or a live event viewership kind of thing like the Oscars. But that notion of synchronous viewing, where millions of people are all watching the same thing at the same time, is kind of been losing its luster. So digital video, which is completely asynchronous and on demand for most people, has become a lot more favorable, mostly because it's more attributable. So we know exactly, who's seeing things. We even can buy online video based upon the percentage of viewability that it has, which is crazy, because you would think that means every advertiser would want to buy 100% viewable ad inventory, but they don't. Mm-hmm. Mostly because it's too expensive, mm-hmm. which is weird.
So, I mean, it's obvious it's become so foundational in not just in terms of how media is communicating, but also how we individually are communicating. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just the technological shift that has meant that it has become so foundational, or do you think there are sort of other factors at play?
I mean, we like to watch things. I mean, it's as simple as that. I don't think anything I don't think technology has changed human behavior as much as human behavior has really embraced the advances in technology. So, the idea that we can, capture and share something in a moment, and I think, we've all had one of those moments where something that we shot on video, maybe too many people watched it, or maybe get the feeling that too few people watched what we hoped a lot of people would see. I think that kind of notion that any of us can create something and instantly broadcast it to a lot of people is quite compelling and makes us want to use the format even more. But I would also say that a lot of the content that's currently being made for digital platforms, everything from social media platforms in a horizontal format or a square format, for that matter, to a vertical format, is really opening people's eyes to the quality of content that can be made in these kind of brand new formats. Every time a new video format or a new platform emerges, there's it creates a vacuum where a lot of content rushes into it, and usually the bar for the quality of that content is pretty low. So anything even slightly above that bar breaks out. What we're starting to find now is a lot of what we would call professional content producers are now rushing in first.
Right.
So the quality of the content is getting a lot better. Quality of video is getting a lot better, which means, eyeballs follow the quality.
But that doesn't necessarily squeeze out the sort of individual and user-generated content, and that also, in some circumstances, still reaching kind of mainstream audiences. And I say that because I do want to take just a minute to sort of reference something that happened to Ian sort of fairly recently, both in the context of vertical video and also in the context of Ian's foray into citizen journalism. So why don't you just quickly tell this story before we move on to number 2?
So I was at the New York Knicks game a couple of weeks ago and happened to be sitting about 10 rows away from where Charles Oakley got into a very infamous fight, former Knick Charles Oakley. If I went into the history of that, I'd eat through all of our time. But I captured this fight between this legendary former Knick player and the owner of the Knicks, and it quickly became like the video, like the footage. Bob Lee on ESPN referred to it morbidly as the Zapruder film of the NBA. So I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen because I didn't start recording it from the very beginning, but then when things escalated, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be that guy now. And so I recorded it just for posterity, posted it, and I wound up having to give about 40 major news organizations rights during the game, and I missed most of the game. But needless to say, that's obviously the power of what capturing that kind of raw footage on a scene is able to do. Very difficult to monetize.
I remember you said there was a point in which you were hesitant about actually sharing it, knowing the fact that you have a pretty decent following, a very decent following on Twitter, but more importantly, a lot of the people that follow you are the media outlets, and so you just knew before you posted it the implication or the consequences that would sort of happen as a result. Yeah,
and that's really, believe me, like there's nothing to brag about with the size of my Twitter following, but there are journalists. Like, I am friendly with journalists, and some of whom are in the sports world, and so knowing that they would see that right away and rebroadcast it, was something that I wasn't sure as a Knicks season ticket holder that I wanted to be associated with me necessarily, but it happened anyway, and no regrets.
Well, one quick follow-up question on the video side of things. So. A couple of recent announcements, particularly on the Facebook side, in regards to them inserting ads into, obviously, video content. So how should brands and publishers wrap their heads around the new mid-roll ads on Facebook? And what do you also think about YouTube's plan to eliminate unskippable pre-roll ads?
Yeah, okay. So, with Facebook, it's funny. When you talk to someone on the Facebook sales team, they'll say, focus on the first 2 seconds of the video because no one watches past that. Which is fascinating and jarring and makes you question why you're even buying video on Facebook in the first place. So they suggest cinemagraphs, which, okay, I get it, because then that's just a looping 2 seconds. I think the difference is that when audiences opt into content that they want to see from publishers whom they trust, which is really like the top 1% of the content producers on those platforms, who, by the way, are probably eating into their own business models by being in that 1% on Facebook. I think people wind up watching videos a lot more, like a larger percentage of that. We've seen cases where we've published the same professionally created video from a brand page and the same professionally created video from the publisher who we worked with to make it, and it went from basically like a 5% completion rate to a 65 to 85% completion rate. So at that point, that means if there was a mid-roll there, someone might actually be watching it. And I think that's what Facebook is trying to do. And the moves that they've made, whether it's on hiring people to liaise with the news business or hiring Ricky Van Veen, who I think I interviewed.
You did last year.
Ricky is now leading original content for Facebook. They're anticipating that there's going to be more video on that platform that people are going to be watching more of in terms of percentage of completion. In which case, I think if people are sticking around to watch that and watch obviously Facebook's moves in the TV business, there is a Facebook TV app coming. That it'll just be a natural thing for buyers to buy. And when you're looking at Facebook as a public company and any publicly traded company, especially that's a platform, they are in the business of not necessarily innovating on the platform as much as they are making it as easy for buyers to buy something that they are already buying, that looks like something that they're already buying. And mid-roll looks a hell of a lot like a TV commercial.
So let me ask you a question that also serves as a segue to number 2 as we talk about messaging. In your view, what is Facebook's strategy of taking inspiration from Snapchat in several different product areas? Stories, obviously the Messenger's camera-focused update, WhatsApp, ephemeral features, etc.
That's like Frank Caliendo taking inspiration from the people that he imitates on television. I mean, I think they steal features from other platforms, and they're not shy about it because they work, right? And Facebook can take something that works for 100 million people and make it work for 300 million people, and they haven't been shy about it. In fact, it's been working quite well, right? So Instagram's Stories feature, which is a complete copy of Snapchat's, is working tremendously well, and a lot of people are choosing that. Let's say maybe slightly older people than Snapchat, but they're choosing that over Snapchat's features just because it's a place where, again, more people are. Most people, when they're creating content for these platforms, whether they're professionals or amateurs, will opt towards the platform that gives them the opportunity for greater reach.
Definitely.
And I think that's what's at play here. So, we're in this world of, this is an old economics term, but like superstar companies, where there are too few companies that control too much of the world's resources. And increasingly, you're seeing these companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon, who is doing everything from giving you free shipping on your toothpaste through to winning an Oscar. And so I think as they see that there are things that are working out there, they're going to be quick to adapt to those things that work unabashedly.
I think there was like a collective sigh of relief among everyone who was aged like 35 years and older when Instagram brought out the Stories feature, because it just meant that we didn't have to use Snapchat anymore.
We didn't have to read an S1 filing to figure out how to use Snapchat, right?
Exactly. All right, let's move on. Number 2. I'm going to move through this quite quickly. So messaging as a platform, largely dominated by Facebook, WeChat, obviously Snapchat, although they've redefined themselves as a camera company, which I still find like a little odd. But we know as a platform, it's still obviously growing rapidly. It's evolving from just simple text communication to becoming like our new home screen. It's becoming a place for vivid self-expression, and also it's becoming a place for commerce. So there are a bunch of different sort of ways in which we can kind of sort of approach this. But first, what's your general sort of thinking around Snapchat's current strategy? Obviously, we are a day away from them going public. What role do you see Snapchat playing in the messaging space, and how do you see that product and platform evolving?
I don't actually think of Snapchat as a messaging company. They don't think about themselves as a messaging company, clearly. And I would say that they've even walked back the claim that they're a camera company. I think they're a capture the culture company. And so, I think Snapchat is going to slowly move away from what we currently think of as like disposable ephemeral messaging, and more into the world of quality content shared with people, whether that's you sharing content with your friends, whether that's professionals creating content expressly for their platform. I think they look at Snap as a company more like a media company than a technology platform. Right. One that is hopefully impervious to the kinds of feature thefts that other companies are having with them. Other companies, like Facebook, for example, squarely sees themselves in the messaging business. They have a product called Messenger. They obviously own WhatsApp. I mean, but I think the messaging, maybe I'll eat into the next question. I think the messaging as a platform in general is a utility. It's a means to an end. The end for consumers being obviously a utility for me and you to communicate with one another. But for the companies who operate those platforms, the end is data, is collecting data about the way that we use those platforms, the way that we share those platforms. If there's any commerce on those platforms, like there are in like Asia Pacific regions, where basically, all kinds of commerce happens within, like messaging platforms are basically like a mini internet, a micro internet, big internet. That's, they just graft off of that. And so, I don't think the business model for any of these platforms is anything like, pay to access them, as a utility in that regard. I think we're just creating so much data on those platforms about where we're standing, all the way through to, how we're interacting with some customer service bot, that feeds them in with the data that they in turn sell to advertise.
I just think there's like a real tension though between, how the users define their use of the platform versus how the platforms themselves define their businesses. And that tension with Snapchat, it's not limited to Snapchat, it's true of a lot of the messaging platforms, but the problem is that most people on that platform are communicating one-to-one or communicating within groups, and for them it's an intimate way of being able to keep in touch with their friends. You can call it a utility, but you can also call it self-expression, but it's fundamentally communication. And the tension for me is that these platforms need to have business models. They need to make money, and so they need to define themselves in ways that, to a certain extent, could even at some point in the future alienate them towards their users. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, but I think that's business, especially if you're a public company and you have expected, earnings per share per quarter. You have to find ways to create the most profit possible, and actually, like charging people is not necessarily the best way to profits. It's charging companies for the same thing multiple times, almost infinite numbers of times, like data. Like that's where the business is for these companies. Like for you and me, like the more, like there's a limit to how much we can even spend on or through these platforms. It's why I think, everyone opens themselves up to, what we call enterprise solutions, like Amazon, Jeff Bezos saying like, yeah, we need to build the cloud, when everyone was saying, what the hell's the cloud? Now all of a sudden Amazon Web Services powers, most of the internet. So like that's where these companies have to think, which is why they say they're so consumer obsessed. Right. Because they can focus on the business model without anybody paying attention to it, while the people that use it feel like everything's being done for them.
All right, number 3, rise of machine-assisted communications. So we're talking about Facebook Messenger, and the incredible proliferation of chatbots that we are now sort of seeing and interacting with every day. And these chatbots exist for a whole variety of different reasons: for customer support, for customer service, for commerce-based reasons, to helping to assist people in terms of making mobile payments and purchasing things. 2016, well, latter part of 2016, certainly 2017, seems to be the year of the chatbot. But it's interesting to sort of see, or interesting to sort of think about the kind of the hype and how the hype obviously compares to individual usage. So what are your sort of general kind of thoughts on the machine-assisted communications space? And then what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about what it really represents for kind of marketers and for the media.
Well, if you look at, there are 2 ways to think about this. So if you look at it as like artificial intelligence and how that's, and the role that that's going to play, like machine-assisted learning, that's the future of everything. That when people talk about the singularity, where humans have no place to evolve other than, through the assistance of machines. I think that's where everything is headed. It's like getting power steering in your car. Like it starts by making like things like just incrementally easier, and then all of a sudden like you wake up and everything's like doing the thinking for you, which gets you to idiocracy, and I won't go there. But from machine-assisted communications, I think what we're finding is that's just another way that the robots are taking our jobs, right? Like so, when you need immediate help from somebody, like where's my order? Like you don't need to talk to somebody in Iowa, much less India, like to find out like where your package is. There are systems that can tell you and track that for you, and even proactively deliver that message for you, before you even have the chance to think to ask. And I think that's just the natural order of things. It's science and technology advancing things beyond the places where humans can go, and increasingly shrinking, or I guess making the expectations that we have of the way that we engage with companies, much less brands. It's raising the bar on that. So everyone that doesn't keep up with that is going to be seen in most likelihood as someone that's not keeping up with the pace of technology and leaving the door open for competitors that have embraced that from the very beginning.
I mean, if you think about like 2008, 2009, when social media week first started, and when we were talking about social media, we were like, we're so sort of excited about the promise of being able to kind of like communicate in more human ways, and not just like one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, also like, talking to brands and talking to sort of businesses. And now we're in a situation, and like later this week, we literally have like 12 to maybe 15 individual events that will be touching on AI and chatbots in some form or another. And so now we're in a situation when we're talking about machines talking to humans. Do you have any concerns about like where that is actually heading in terms of its impact on the ways in which humans interact and communicate?
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll land squarely in some utopian places and some dystopian places. I mean, you'll have the best parts of Her, the movie, right? And you'll have parts where the machines, where you have Skynet and like Terminator or War Games. But we live in a world of extremes now. I think that's pretty clear. And the way things are going, you're going to have companies that again are looking at that for ways to eliminate 20% of their workforce, and there are companies that are going to look at it in ways that are going to make 80% of their workforce do 20% more. And I think it's just a matter of which perspective that you want to take as a business, because at the end of the day, it's businesses that are going to have the power to implement things at a large scale. Individuals are going to be able to do wonderful things with this technology. They're going to be able to change lives. They're going to bring peace to places that have never seen peace, bring food to places that are hungry. Like all that stuff is going to happen. It's just that you can't underestimate the power of profits. And unfortunately, I think that's going to drive a lot of the implementation of all that.
All right, keeping the pace up as much as we can. 2 more to go. Let's talk about new layers of immersion. So we're talking about like new fields of reality we've never experienced before, provided to us by augmented reality, virtual reality. These things are having a pretty significant impact on how we communicate, how we play games, how we watch films, even how we interact with doctors and teachers, and potentially how we experience the world around us. It sounds great. And in many cases it is, but I know that you have a sort of a particular point of view on kind of this new emerging space, where it is now and where it's heading in the future. So, so why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's cute. I mean, it's cute and it's got like wild, amazing possibilities, right? So today, you've got, there's not a lot of penetration of this stuff, right? So like more people have seen those commercials for the Galaxy Gear than certainly have ever experienced it. That said, Sony just put out numbers. They said about 915,000 Sony VR headsets, I'm one of them, were sold. Since they hit the market late last year. So and that's impressive. But when you think about the use case for them, entertainment is by far number one. I mean, there are very few times when it's okay to strap something onto your face. And very few times. Like
can you just maybe touch on a few of those times?
So video gaming is one of them, right? Like people constantly try to find more and more immersive gamings. In fact, even if you look at the history of the arcade, the video arcade, we went from like stand-up, console type games, down to the bar tables where it could be more of a two-person experience. But people wanted more, so then you have to climb into like the box and like play a driving game where your seat's rumbling and you've got surround sound. And now you can have that in the comfort of your own home with VR and some headphones. Like that's the natural order of gaming. I think film is a really interesting place for that as well. I think the thing working against that, though, in that happening in any kind of scale, is the sheer existence of the MPAA. Mm-hmm. So the MPAA is those are all the theater owners, basically, own the MPAA. They have every single reason to get you into that theater, not with a VR headset, unless there are 300 people sitting in that theater, all with VR headsets, which is not likely to happen. So I think there are a lot of forces working against it from hitting mainstream anytime soon. Mm-hmm. I think we will hit a tipping point. I think it's next year when maybe the first tipping point when Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One comes out.
Right.
Which is a great book. Talk about dystopia. but which is all about us evolving to a place where we'd rather spend our time in virtual reality instead of real reality, because the real reality is so bad.
Right.
You could argue that's our Facebook feeds too, though. Now.
Definitely. Well, actually, perfect segue. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Megan Summers from Facebook is going to be giving a talk on this stage about spatial storytelling in the context of VR. So definitely join us for that one. I was talking to Megan last week, and she's going to be sharing some pretty incredible things that Facebook are doing in terms of how they think about spatial storytelling and multi-dimensional spatial storytelling. Also Friday, the New York Times, Samsung are going to be coming in to talk about some of their work in that area as well. So lots of conversations around VR over the course of this week. All right, we've got to keep moving. We've only got a few more minutes. Let's talk about shifting business models and new metrics. So for measuring advertising success, there is an enormous amount of uncertainty in the business right now. Things continue to shift. There's an enormous amount of disruption. There are questions around programmatic display versus subscription, branded content versus promoted content. Big issues in terms of the Facebook-Google duopoly and what that represents for the industry. And we literally only have a couple minutes really to touch upon these sorts of things. Yeah. So let's start with what role does Facebook Instant Articles versus Google's AMP platforms have on the publisher space?
Oof. Everything that Facebook and Google does is at the expense of the publishers' former business models, which is all about owning their own publications, owning their own subscribers, owning the eyeballs that see their content. What AMP and Instant Articles have done is basically take all of those things away from the publishers for just a slice of the pie. And publishers have had to deal with that. It's not easy to deal with shrinking wealth. It's like there's look at like that's usually the downfall of anybody. Very few people that are rich overcome the phase of their life where their richness starts going down. I mean, they wind up going bankrupt before they make it back, right? And I think that what's happening is that these publishers are facing a period of time where they have to get comfortable with their business being smaller than it is, unless they're preparing a shadow company that is doing it the new way. And I think there are a couple of companies out there that are doing stuff like that. I think you can point to Hearst and what Troy Young is doing there, is doing a little bit of that. They're playing the old game as well as playing the new game, and they're investing heavily in that new game. But for publishers that are still trying to fight off the impact of Google and Facebook on their businesses, are just going to find themselves in a world of hurt. Their content studios are not going to be able to survive the way they are. They can't afford to give away all of that stuff, just for a 10% chance of winning an RFP. They can't, if they're not selling content directly to consumers, it's going to be hard to make that kind of quality content, and then you're going to have to resort to clickbait, and then Facebook's going to throttle you down, and then no one sees what you have to write. And it's just, I just think that most publishers are squarely in that existential crisis right now, and they're going to have to come out of it one end or the other.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, and not surprisingly, we spent a huge amount of time talking about video, not that much time talking about business models. That seems fairly reflective of our industry. But please join me in thanking Ian Schafer. Thank you guys for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the week. Cheers.